So, Jeff, there's a lot of excitement right now on the pro-life side as the Dobbs case ruling is about to come down from the Supreme Court. It could very well, based on the draft we've seen, completely overturn Roe v. Wade. And if that happens, there's a lot of speculation on both sides about what that will mean. But I want to start with the pro-life movement. What misconceptions do you think there might be right now about a post-Roe world?
Well, Billy, that's a great question. I think there's a lot in the media right now that people think that abortion is going to be ended because Roe v. Wade has been overturned. And obviously that's not the case. It just means it gets sent back to the states, and we're going to need to decide this issue state by state across America. And so back to the representatives and away from a federal mandate on abortion.
Yeah, and when you look at that, it would seem to me, and you are on the ground here, obviously, with Human Coalition. You guys are doing a lot of this, amazing work. But when you look at that, that means you sort of go from this federal issue, and obviously there have always been state issues around abortion, but you sort of move into an era in which there are 50 different battles going on, these smaller statewide battles. Would that be an accurate depiction of where we're headed?
Absolutely. It's perfectly accurate. Every state is going to have their own laws and regulations around abortion. The reality of it is, there's probably about 26 states that have pro-life legislation or what's called trigger laws on the books that immediately pro-life legislation that's been on the books will be enacted. However, that's only a third of the population of the United States. So if you look at where abortion will still be legal, and I think there'll be even less regulations in those pro-abortion states and make it easier for folks to have abortion in those states. Two-thirds of the population reside in those states. And so there's still a lot of work to be done to make abortion unthinkable. We have to change hearts and minds to understand that this is a life in the womb, and preborn children are valuable, just as 1-year-olds and 5-year-olds and 16-year-olds across America. And so we have to fight for their dignity and right to life.
So let's talk about the Human Coalition. For those who don't know, let's start with the work you do and how you think that work is going to change. So it's a two-part question. Once we're in a post-Roe world.
Yeah, well, Human Coalition is the largest pro-woman, pro-life organization in the country. We work both directly with clients in the service side. So we own and operate our own women's care clinics, telecare, and what we call continuum of care. We have about 180 employees across the country, but we also work on the legislative side. So we work hand in hand with service, understanding what women really need, and then help write and protect good laws that actually move the needle for those women and children and families. And so in a post-Roe world, that's going to be even more important than ever. In Texas, with the Heartbeat Act, we're seeing over 100 lives a day being rescued, more than it was before the law came into effect. But these women are still in very difficult situations and still need the hands and feet of the people of God in their communities, really helping surround them. So what we call continuum of care, or those wraparound services, the reason that they feel like abortion is the only answer for them is typically around an employment situation, or someone leaving them because if they have the child, that their boyfriend or husband's going to leave. And so we have to be in those gaps. We have to be ready to help serve that woman and bring her from that situation, from dependence to independence. And I think that's the work that we have to do as a pro-life movement. There's already great work being done in those areas, but I think we have to do more.
Well, and when you're in the conversation and you see it unfold, people on the pro-choice side will say, well, if you're really pro-life, you're going to do this, and that. They're going to list out a series of things. You mentioned some of those things, helping meet the needs that are at the baseline of why people say they're seeking abortions, right? And so there's a lot to unpack there. And I do love you made the point. A lot of people like you guys, you're doing a lot of good work. We all have to come together and do more. What would you say right now to a pro-life person who is watching this? They're very excited over the draft. They're looking forward to the potential of Roe being gone. What would be your call to action to those people, though, in light of what would be coming?
Yeah, it's a great question. And first of all, we as people of God, churches, pastors, have to increase the moral priority of life, that this has to be one of their number one issues in their church is how do we help and preserve life, and how do we be the hands and feet of Christ in our communities, in our backyards, knowing that there's women, children, and families that need a helping hand. And so I would say, one, continue to elevate this as a moral priority. Continue to make this important in your church and look at it as a holistic approach to life, from adoption to foster care to continuum of care, and walking with this woman, helping provide those incredibly needed wraparound services. And so it's getting involved, doing what you can. You know, we're looking at some national scale technology programs where we can connect the community and the church with those clients through an online portal of just helping in that moment of need and being there available to her, anywhere from just helping with a crib to mentors and coaches to housing and education and employment opportunities. So Human Coalition is really quarterbacking all those kinds of things, working hand in hand with churches and community involvement for these women. And I think that's the most important thing that we can do in a post-Roe world, because women are still going to be in those vulnerable situations. It's going to be love that changes the world. And we have to make abortion unthinkable. The same way we look at slavery or sex trafficking today, we have to look at the life in the womb, that it is unthinkable that we would take the life of that child.
You know, and I think that that's such a key piece here, right, is making it unthinkable and also helping people understand. I mean, one of the things that's been really fascinating to me in this Roe and Dobbs debate has been watching people come out and say, well, this was settled law, you know, and this term settled law is intriguing to me because in 1857, the Dred Scott case, you know, obviously you had a situation in which the Supreme Court, in probably their worst ruling in history, said that slaves could not be protected, were not citizens, and that was settled law for a time, was it not? So this idea that that something is set in stone and it can never be challenged, I think is sort of a logical piece, helping people understand that's not really how it works. And then kind of moving from there. But that kind of brings me into this, you know, we're talking about making it unthinkable. We're talking about helping people understand, connecting the mind and the heart together. Right now, those things are very separated for a lot of people on this issue, where they just can't see why it should be unthinkable. What have you seen in your work leading Human Coalition, and even in your time before that volunteering with the organization, that has been the most effective in helping people learn, helping women see that, you know what, abortion should be unthinkable?
Yeah, you know, I think it's really important for all of your listeners and people to understand that what we see on the mass media of just these extreme radical feminists that scream about bodily autonomy is not the general population. 75% of the women whom we serve that have already made up their mind to have an abortion when they contact us would say they would prefer to parent if their circumstances were different. Doesn't that break your heart? That 75% would love to be a mom, but they don't feel like they have the support and the mechanisms and coming around. If men would stand up and be the kind of Christian men that we profess to be, coming around these women, they are heartbroken. They are in very difficult situations. And the world is telling them what they can't do. We need to help them do what they're empowered to do, help them flourish as moms and families. That's what women really want. And so coming in and providing that to help, stepping in the gap for them during a very difficult, dark time in their life will change the world to make abortion unthinkable. They begin to see this is a valuable life. You know, the child is only unwanted if willing to abort when they're unwanted. A child that's wanted by the mother is intrinsically valuable. So the difference there doesn't change. It's just the mindset of the person who is actually having the child. And so we need to continue to advocate for her and the child and realize that preborn children in the womb are just as valuable as a 1-year-old or 2-year-old outside of the womb.
That is a powerful point. Now, if I were to summarize all this, it sounds like what you're saying is there may be, or there obviously is, if Roe is overturned, there's cause for celebration. It's something that the pro-life movement has worked toward for decades. But at the same time, once that celebration has ended, people need to dig in, get back out there and make abortion unthinkable and continue the hard work. And in fact, maybe the work will become even harder in some ways. I don't know, once this does happen.
I think you're right. I don't think it gets easier. I think this is a new chapter, and it's exciting that this was bad precedent to begin with, as you mentioned earlier. It's exciting. It's a win, but really our work is just beginning again. So we're going to stop and celebrate for a moment. And Billy, I'd just like to say, my wife and I are celebrating our 29th year anniversary this weekend. And this decision is for my wife and millions of women who have had an abortion. And I just want you to know, my wife and I were engaged to be married, and we got pregnant, and we took the life of our first daughter 30 years ago. And until I got introduced into this work that I'm doing today, I thought it was the unforgivable sin. And there is no sin bigger than the cross of Christ. So if you have had an abortion, if you've been participated in that, I just wanted to say you are forgiven. I hope that there's healing in that, and that we continue to really make abortion unthinkable and unnecessary. And if you've had that experience, share your testimony. I hope you'll see healing in that. This is a time for celebration, that we move forward together and make abortion unthinkable and unnecessary. And so we're excited to be a part of that.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I don't know, hopefully you won't mind me asking this, but were you, that when that happened and your relationship obviously continued, and congratulations on 29 years, but going through that and holding that in and thinking that was sort of an unforgivable sin, did that affect your faith? Did that affect your relationship? Because I know a lot of people are in that place where they're maybe holding on to this and they haven't talked about it.
It did. I think it made us question everything. We were helped build the church. I was a lay pastor. My wife was a worship leader. During this whole time, we were in a church, and yet the pastor didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about it. And the fact that we didn't made it even more taboo. It made it harder on those. And so pastors need to share their experiences and help heal the deep wounds that abortion causes. I mean, Billy, I live every day knowing that because I didn't step in and do what Human Coalition and pregnancy centers are doing, I lost who would be a 30-year-old daughter today because of that choice. And that's a hard thing. It's still very tender. And yet I know God forgives us, that there's healing and there's restoration. And so that's what I pray over all those that have been impacted by abortion. It's not easy. And certainly my wife and I have been through our tough times in our marriage. She wondering, would I value her during tough times? Would I pursue her? Would I love her unconditionally? And at 23, I wasn't strong enough or even understood. I felt like the government sanctioned it. It must be okay. And yet we, through ignorance, the Bible says, my people perish for a lack of knowledge. And so we have to give knowledge and understanding that this is a child. We can work together and flourish as moms and families. And so this is for all those women. We love you. We are grateful that for the redeeming love of Christ.
And just as we close, I want to say thank you for sharing that story and what you just said, because a lot of people are suffering in silence and they haven't dealt with it. But also looking at your story and seeing where you are now and what you're doing, and the fact that God has redeemed your story and you're helping other people. And this is what God does with our stories when we turn our lives over to him. So I really appreciate you sharing all of that today, Jeff.
Thanks for having me on your show. Great job on all that you're doing. Thanks for sharing this word with so many people.